Welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Quitting, where we are focusing on quitting the habits that no longer serve us so we can elevate our health, our habits, and our happiness. My name is Gentry. I am your host of this podcast. And today I have a special guest who I intentionally got fired from her job to free up time so that she could be here with us today, Mary. And so I'm excited to get into our conversation. She is also sober, and that's how I found her on social media. So this sounds like something you'd be interested in listening to. Stick around. This episode is for you. Welcome, Mary, to the Addicted to Quitting podcast. How are you?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me. I feel like this has been a while in the making. We finally got the time, figured it out.
I'm so glad that you're here. I interviewed one other comedian, and I've followed you for a while, but I just feel like comedians in recovery is such a fascinating topic to me. Like, just like the depths of hell of addiction, and then to like the highs of humor.
Do you mind if I ask who the other comic was?
Sam Miller.
Oh, I don't know them. Interesting.
He's from Washington State. So, because you're on the East Coast.
Yes, I'm in New York City.
Yeah, so he's been over there to do stuff, but most of the shows that he does is over on this side.
Okay, I was just curious. So I got sober from alcohol 5 years ago. Coming up on 6, actually, March 3rd, 2019. I got sober from alcohol. That was my big problem. I did a lot of other things too, but those were never like the main factor. Was always booze. So for me, it was it's funny because like in active addiction, it's like, oh, I'm just a party girl. Like that's just who I am. Like I drink and I have fun and we do shots and we go out dancing. And, I was heavy in my 20s. I started drinking in like high school. I think I had my first drink when I was like 14. But always for fun, always for the party, always a good time. It actually wasn't until being sober that I was able to pinpoint and see that like, I was using alcohol to escape feelings. I never would have thought that because I was always having so much fun and I was always the life of the party and like I was always the shot guy. Like that was me 100% of the time. If you didn't know where I was, you could catch me at the bar ordering shots. And I would always order them for everybody because I'm like, well, I want to be more drunk. So it's okay for me to do my 11th shot if I'm buying 5 of them because then everybody's partying, But now through being, coming up on 6 years in recovery, I've noticed that my biggest trigger is feeling big emotions in mostly sad because I don't really anymore want to drink when I'm happy, which is crazy. But when I have big uncomfortable emotions, whether it's grief or depression or anxiety, mainly I would drink to not feel. And so that is kind of like the basis, I guess, of what my personal relationship with alcohol was. It didn't really get bad until, it was never great. I was a blackout drunk for a decade, right?
That's what I'm like. I'm like, people be like, oh, you're not that bad, or you weren't that bad. I'm like, it was always bad. Like, just because it wasn't like DUIs yet, or like, I like, it's like the perception of bad with alcohol feels so warped because
it's like you never killed anybody. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you shouldn't. Like, what are you talking about? You should never get there.
It's not an option, like to be like that far, or like you never lost your kids. Like but my kids maybe could have been taken. Like if you could see behind closed doors how much I was drinking, yeah.
It's always funny to me that people, oh, I didn't notice or I didn't do this. It was because I feel like personally with me, my drinking got bad when I started to hide it, when I started to do it at home by myself, when I was drinking 2-3 bottles of wine a night. But in my head, I rationalized it being like, well, this is me being, because I had a real big problem drinking and driving. I loved it. Yeah. I would want to get behind the wheel after just a couple drinks. And so my being responsible was staying at home and drinking. So I'm like, well, I can't be irresponsible. I'm at home. What damage could I do at home? And it turns out so much damage, the most actually, because you're like trapped in. So then your phone is still there. The internet is still there. But yeah, it got bad for me where I was like, I was always a binge drinker. So I was never like a daily drinker. I would drink, 4 or 5 days in a row, blackout, and then I wouldn't drink for like a week or two. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well, I must not have a problem. Like if I can go alcoholics can't go 2 weeks without drinking. I can go 2 weeks without drinking. I do not have a problem. Um, so for me, it got to the point when I was just not just a weekend drinking. It was like 5 days in a row, 6 days in a row of blacking out. I mean, like drinking until I black out, passing out, waking up, starting my day doing the exact same thing. Like that's when it really started to get bad. And you know, definitely a series of events that led to me quitting.
A lot of things that you're saying right here are very similar to me. Like I was a blackout drinker and I could quit when I was pregnant, and it was like, I don't have a problem. I can quit. I can quit. Like once there's an opportunity, I was able to stop. But then like, so I think it's just fascinating to hear about other people's experience with alcohol and what it was for them to quit.
So, obviously you quit the bad habits, you quit the drinking. And I don't know if you go to meetings or if anybody listening is involved in 12 step or whatever but that's something that they do tend to say quite a bit is that the drinking is a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
The drinking is not the problem. The drinking is the symptom. The drinking is the fever. The flu is the problem. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I've always viewed it. And I didn't want that to be the case, obviously. So
No.
early in recovery, you're like, oh, I'm sober. I fixed it. The
Mm-hmm.
problems are gone. I'm not drinking more. I don't know what you're still mad at me about. I
I,
did the thing. I quit.
I relate to that. I put myself in rehab at 21, and I
Hmm.
thought like if I could just not drink alcohol, everything would be better. I'd be fine. Like I just had to remove the alcohol, and I never dealt with the, like you're saying, the feelings. Like
Yes.
so I want to get into that of like what you've done to kind of work with on that in a second, but I do think that like a lot of times people think if I just remove the alcohol, like that's what was my first thought. I just need to not drink. If I just don't drink alcohol, then I'll be perfect. I will be a
then
perfect
I yeah,
human
then I
being.
won't do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe you won't be fueled to, but you'll still want to. Like
Yeah.
that's still in you. You have to figure out what's making you do it's not vodka. You want to say it's vodka, but it's not, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So that was the part where I was like, well, everything will get so much better. And it did, believe me, my life is
Oh yeah,
unbelievable.
does. Mhm.
But for me personally, it is that dealing with emotions. And it has taken me years of sobriety to realize that that was my crutch, was that when I did not want to feel, I would drink.
Mhm.
And it's hard, dude. Even now, like 5 years in, there's still some days where I'm like, at least, but the difference is now I can recognize it, right? When I start to get, I don't even really want to call it an urge because I do feel like um I know I'm done drinking. I know that in my heart. I know you take it day by day. And again, some of these things I'm saying people in 12 step wouldn't agree with. Um, but I know that real urge to mess my entire life back up is gone. That just too much evidence to the contrary for me to ever go back.
Mhm.
But there are days when I start to have uncomfortable feelings and I am like, I don't want to do this. And I get really aggravated and I get very pissy and I get very frustrated with everyone where I'm just like, I just don't want to feel what I'm feeling right now. And it has nowhere to go.
Mhm.
And that has been an incredibly, incredibly hard thing for me in sobriety. Um, when I first quit drinking, I will admit I still smoked weed for like 2 years. Um, eh, yeah, like 2 years. I still smoked weed or ate edibles. And then my father passed away and I was not able to be high anymore. It was like during mid COVID, my dad had just died, and I was like, oh, no, 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 I cannot high alone with everything I have going on, global pandemic, dad dying. This is not it. So I quit. The last time I was high was in 2021. It was like summer of 2021. So I've been completely clean and sober for, I guess that'll be going on a little over 4 years, but sober from alcohol for going on 6. And then, I mean, a lot of people will do this where they'll have one addiction turn into another, whether it's
Mhm.
smoking or sex or whatever. For me, then after my dad died, it became gambling, where that was something my dad and I did together. And then when he passed away, it was kind of like, oh, this is all that I have. This is something we would do. This is something that I liked. But then I didn't realize it was also something that helped me not feel. So for a while, it was just like a way to remember my dad. Oh, me and my dad would go to the casino, so I'll play some slots and I'll play his numbers on roulette and it'll feel like a closeness. And then, as addictions do, it's a progressive disease. So it
Mhm.
became more and more, and it became more now when I feel frustrated or angry and I know I don't drink or smoke weed anymore. Now I want to go gamble because I'm like, well, the excitement of winning money or potentially winning money is changing your mood, is changing your feelings, is taking you out of that aggravation. So that has even just been in like the last 2 or 3 years that I've been dealing with that as a way to like, hey, knock it off. Like you know what you're doing. You know you're using this because you
Yeah.
don't want to address your feelings. And so it is better in the sense that I acknowledge it. It's not great in the sense that I'm still doing it, but that is something that I've been trying to tackle for like the last 2 years has been getting gambling under control, getting my feelings to a place where I'm able to address them, understand them, and sit in them.
Hmm.
And that is probably for me the hardest part of sobriety is that you just I have there's a friend whose name is Dave Yates. He's a very funny comedian who's also sober. He has a joke where I don't remember the premise. I think it's about being a tough guy or something like that. But the punchline is he's like, have you ever felt every feeling for 12 years? And it's like that, it hits you because you're like, there has not gone a day where I haven't been like, oh, no, this is just what it is. Sit with it, figure it out. That's the hardest part for me.
Yeah. Well, okay, so a couple things with that. I it's so fitting for the podcast because it's like addicted to quitting. It talks about how once you quit something, or like that's what my whole thought with this podcast is like you quit something, other things come up that you also want to quit or be better at or like, okay, now that you quit alcohol, either something surfaced that was already there that you had to now deal with, or things kind of manifest into something else that you now have to deal with. So we have to become addicted to continuously trying to quit the things that aren't serving us.
I
And that's
like that.
exactly what we were talking about is like, okay, I quit alcohol, but then I kind of had a crutch of smoking for a little bit or edibles for a little bit. And then I quit that. And then I found this other crutch. So like bringing awareness to the crutches that you're implementing so that you can be like, okay, now I want to quit this one and get better at not going to that one until it's like constantly funneling it down to get to the real raw you.
And that person is terrifying because a lot of alcoholics or people who are addicts have never met that person.
No.
I don't know who she is. She could suck, dude. Do you know what I mean? Like, what happens? And I think this is an epiphany I'm having live with you right now. What happens when we funnel all the way down and that person that's left, we're like, what this is
This is
it?
her.
Yeah, oh, come on. You know what I mean? I think that's what I'm afraid of to a certain degree is that when you get down to it and you're like, oh, maybe what if I don't like the person that I actually am? And that's probably what keeps people using for a long time is that you're like, the devil you know is better than the one you don't. What's that saying? Right? The devil you know, trust the devil you know, or something along the lines of
Yeah.
like, I can deal with this because I know how, regardless
Yeah.
if it's right or not.
It's
I know Addict Mare and I know how she works.
Mhm.
Completely clean, sober, emotionally healthy, no problems. I don't know what that is.
Mhm.
That's unknown and it's scary.
Yeah. And when I think something that was big for me, what I found in alcohol young, like was that I could act like who truly I was, but with the excuse and blanket of alcohol because I am loud and I am obnoxious and I am dancing on tables and I am silly. But when I started feeling like I wasn't sure if I was going to fit in for being that, alcohol came in and I could be all of those things and be like, oh man, I was drunk last night. It's like,
Yeah.
or I might just do that shit because that's the type of person I am and I think it's fun and I think it's funny to be silly and like, but I use the alcohol as kind of like my protective barrier to be like, oh, I acted that way because of this, or I cry. I'm a crier. Like I still today am a crier.
Dude,
I
I
get
cry every
overwhelmed.
day.
I'm just like tears. But when I was drunk, it was like, oh, I'm sorry I was so emotional last night. I was drunk. It was like,
Yeah.
or I'm just a freaking crybaby. Like I don't know how to handle my feelings. So yeah,
So for
that makes
you, it was more you didn't know how, or you were afraid that other people wouldn't accept you for what you were. So you wanted to have something to blame it on in case they didn't.
yeah.
So they might have loved you being loud and dancing on tables, but in case they didn't, you would be like, oh, I was so drunk. I have an out.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And
I
that's how
never,
it started. I think
yeah,
that's how it started. I think that definitely over time, I became a mom and things just got heavier and overwhelming. I kind of felt trapped in my life. And so it became a way for me to just cope. Like it was just like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not getting my work done. I'm not getting shit done. And so I'm gonna check out with alcohol until I'm ready to check back in.
yeah. And when did you check back in though?
Days later.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's the lies you tell yourself where you're like, okay, this, for me, I'm going to have a glass of wine,
Hmm.
but I always call them house pours. So it was the biggest glass I had filled almost to the top, like that.
Hmm.
I'm just going to have one. I just need it to relax, or I just had a stressful week, or I just had this, or I just had that. Or once I do this, I'll just drink this glass and then I'll go back to writing. Like for me, being a self employed creative person, where it's like, no, I've read some of the things you've written while you're drunk. It's trash. It's horrible. Not only is it illegible, nobody's going to laugh at this. This is wild to think that you would say this out loud into a microphone. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I used to think I'd write better too. I would write like blogs and stuff. I'm like, oh, look at this. And I'm like, no. But so I actually want to ask about that. So were you doing comedy while you were drinking and in sobriety, or was that more of something that you leaned into in sobriety?
Yes, I've been the whole time. So I've been doing comedy. It'll be 13 years in February. I just quit drinking 5.5 years ago. So I was drunk for most of it. I did try to have rules. I will say that. When I was very first starting out, I was 22. Um, 13 years, yeah, 22. And it was 21, 22. I was partying. I was working at a bar in my college town. I was, in my last year of college. I was a mess. So for me, it was, I don't know if you remember this. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
36.
Okay, I'm going to be 35 in 5 days on the 25th. So do you remember Bud Light Platinum?
Yeah.
Okay, Bud Light Platinum, when it came out, for those of you listening, if you don't know what it is, it was like 6% Bud Light or 7% Bud Light. It was essentially like, instead of it being 4%, it was doubled. So you were getting, it was still like low calorie and still like light tasting beer, but it was more intense. And so I loved that. Bud Light Platinum was like, when I first started comedy, those two were the match. I would have 2 beers before I went on stage, 2 Bud Light Platinums, which would be 4 regular Bud Lights, and that would be like what I would feel loose with. And then it was always a party after, because I loved comedy so much and it made me feel so good that I was like, let's celebrate. I had a great set. Or if I wasn't doing well, it was that crowd sucked or my joke bombed. Let's drink. I didn't do well.
Hmm.
So for me at the very beginning, comedy and drinking went hand in hand. And then when I started to do more like paid gigs or more serious road work, where it was like, oh, there's like paid audience members here. You're not at an open mic at a bar. I would make a rule that I don't think I ever broke. I could be wrong, but I don't think I ever broke, that I would take my first drink of the night on stage with me. That I was not allowed to drink before my shows if people were paying to be there, because I'm like, you got to think, if these people got a babysitter, are invested in dinner, they got tickets, like this is already, before the show even starts, this is a $200 night for them. So I felt like I owed them a good show. Now that's a paid show. I was still getting bombed out of my mind at open mics. I would show up fully blacked out and get on stage at an open mic because it's just other comics and they're drunk anyway. But paid shows, my rule was first drink went on stage with me. And I was pretty good about that. As far as I can remember, and I'm sure there were times maybe I slept, but as far as I can remember, I was pretty good about that. But I would get bombed, absolutely annihilated after shows. I am not the person to turn down a drink. So when people would come up to me after the shows and have a good time, hey, what can I get you? We're doing a shot. Let me get you that. And I would have, by the time, just the exiting was over, I'd have 7 backups waiting for me at the bar. And
Hmm.
I'm not going to say no. This is part of the cool, ooh, I'm like the funny guy. Like everybody likes me. It's a little celebrity. So it didn't become a problem with comedy until the tail end, because I was getting so blacked out after shows that I was then starting problems with either comedy club employees or other comedians or anything like that. And that was probably the last 3 months of my drinking. It's also when I started using powders to enhance the drinking. I don't know if you want
Oh,
me to say
yes.
the word or not. How open are
That
we? Can I say
oh,
it?
yeah, yeah. What? You can say it.
Coke?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know because you were like, yeah, yeah.
No,
So
no, no,
it
no,
was
you're
like,
good. You're good. But that's so partying though. It's such a party drug because of that. Because it like I would like sober me up and I could drink long.
yes,
Coke was
yes,
not because I loved Coke. Coke was because
no,
alcohol.
yes. When I explain that to people, because some people love Coke, they love the
Yeah.
feeling of being like that high Coke crazy jaw moving feeling. And I was like, no, 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 no. Coke is for when you start to brown out and you can't really walk straight. Then you go do Coke and you can drink for another 4 hours. That's the whole point of Coke. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
like
I
I don't know
didn't,
if you ever did Coke without alcohol, but I did a couple times,
no,
and it was just like I was it was not I was did not like it. But alcohol to Coke was awesome.
yes,
Like,
that was some of the worst hangovers you'll ever have in your entire life. But I made it until 29 years old without doing cocaine because I was like, I've had ADHD my whole life. So I've been on and off of prescription medication for that. And I'm like, well, I know how much I like my Adderall, and I know that I have to be very careful with it. Right. So I knew Coke is probably not a good idea for you. And I made it until, no joke, 29 years old. And then in 3 months, and I'm not saying Coke helped ruin my life, but I am saying that the combination of blackout drinking and cocaine definitely led to me getting sober. I can wholeheartedly say that. Yeah.
well, and what's I think is fascinating is that you probably were out of control with your drinking before Coke entered the scene, but because Coke has such a the stigma around it is so different than alcohol that it became more of like, ooh, we might have a problem here.
Yeah. It was I remember the first night I tried it. See, now that I'm looking back on it, I'm trying to remember if it was the first or the second night because there was two people I tried it with the first times, and they were both, I worked in service industry, so it's, you can't take a step without running into cocaine if you're a bartender. You can't. And if it's not Coke, then it is Adderall. It is someone, snorting pills they shouldn't be. um but both with service industry friends. And the night I remember it changing for me and being like, no, I love this. This is so good. We drank until last call, and then our buddy was the bartender, so we did a little bit of after hours till like 4. We go back to my apartment. My girlfriend busted out, and I think I had done it one time before that, and then we ended up doing all of it. And then it was like 2 p.m. and nobody slept. We're still drunk and high. We went to what is called First Call. There was a bar that opened at 6:30 a.m. that in Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm from, that would do, they catered to like third shifters. So it was like construction workers and factory workers and truck drivers, like these overnight grizzly men that wanted to have a beer at 6:30 in the morning, and they would do kegs and eggs. Like they were known for this. So we would call it first call instead of last call. We would go to first call. And so we did first call, and then it turned into like the next day blackout. And I remember that was the time I realized, oh, Coke is a lifeline. This is when I start to feel like I can't drink anymore. I'll just do this bump real quick, and then I can continue to not feel for another 2 days. Like, how have I never figured this out before?
Yeah. No, it's crazy. And it feels like it's so it does feel fun in the moment. And that's what's like I'm like hard to like trying to like how do I teach my kids not to do this stuff? Like how do I
Yeah.
because in the moment it's like, oh, this is so fun. This is so funny. It's so like like I'm not doing anything horrible. Like I'm like this is it's just us hanging out with our friends, but like the after effect. So 3 months of doing that, what were the kind of consequences and after effects that you were feeling from those highs and those fun times?
For me, it's just everything started to get I don't like out of control, even though that's probably correct. But I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped taking care of my house. I stopped taking care of my cat. I stopped, like, everything went to hell because all I wanted to do was drink and do cocaine. That's all I wanted to do. And I somehow gained like 50 pounds during that time when I was like, what, this is not what's supposed to be happening. Like how, anyway. I remember the day after my bottom, like when I woke up and I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to put this entire part of my life behind me. That morning or afternoon, probably, honestly, when I woke up and I looked around my apartment and I was absolutely disgusted with my apartment. Backstory, my mom was a hoarder. So I grew up in a hoarder house that were, dirty clothes and dishes in the sink. And we had 37 cats and no litter box. So they went wherever they wanted. Like, so that was my childhood trauma. And I remember waking up that day and looking around and seeing that in my apartment. Just piles of dirty clothes, shoes everywhere. My cat's litter box completely overfilled. She's out of food. Her water is moldy. My dishes in my sink completely stacked up, completely moldy. The only thing in my fridge is like old takeout and bottles of wine and vodka. Like that's all that my house was. And I remember just having you have your moment of clarity.
Yeah.
Where I looked around, my toilet is black. I am a 29-year-old woman. I should not, this is disgusting. Like, I don't know the last time I cleaned my toilet. I don't know the last time I took a shower. You know what I mean? Just putting on layers and layers and layers on top of eyeliner, on top of dry shampoo, on top of,
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around and I was like, oh my God, this is disgusting. Like, I cannot believe I've let myself get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And that what's funny is to go back to what we were saying a little bit before was when people are like, oh, well, you weren't that bad. I'm like, well, you weren't in my apartment. Nobody ever came into my apartment because it looked like that. If you would have walked into my apartment, you'd have been like, brother, we're going to rehab right now,
So is that what did you do? So do you have that moment of clarity?
What do you mean? What did I do?
So what did you do in that moment? So you had a moment of clarity. Where did you go? How did you decide to get sober?
Okay. So if we have time, I'll tell you the whole story of how I got drunk for the last time. But my moment of clarity, I went to a Panera.
Yes.
I needed chicken noodle soup. Okay. Chicken noodle soup was my hangover food. Okay. It was chicken noodle soup and like a bread bowl from Panera was one of my favorite. I don't know if this is the endorsement they're looking for. But because it was the soup with the lemon I would put in there and then the carbs, it just always made me feel better if I was hungover. So I took myself to Panera and I was sitting there and I was thinking about my apartment and I was thinking about everything that had happened the day before, at what will become my bottom. Mm-hmm. And I just started crying. I'm just sobbing in this Panera and I don't know what to do. And when you got that hangover anxiety, the hangxiety, where like, so my chest is shaky, my heart is racing, I'm like sweating, I'm trying to eat this soup, I haven't eaten anything, I'm nauseous, and I'm bawling my eyes out in public. And so what I did next is I posted on social media. I posted on Facebook, I posted on Instagram, I posted out, hey, I have a drinking problem. I've never said it before. This is hard for me. I don't even remember exactly what it said, but I'm sure I could find it. But yeah, it was basically me having this mental breakdown and posting it to social media because I didn't have the social media following I have now. But I was a stand-up comedian and I was filling in on a radio show that would then become, my day job. And I was posting it for accountability. And I even said that in the post that I was like, why am I putting all this out here? Because I need you guys. Like, if you see me out at a bar in Cleveland, and again, this isn't like, oh my God, I'm some famous person, but enough people knew me and I had worked in the service industry for 10 years. I was like, don't serve me. I don't care if I ask. If you see me out at a show, please don't offer me a drink. Like, I have to change my life. And that really helped. I had like an overwhelming support, people texting me, people calling me, some people saying, I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad you finally came to this decision. Some people being like, my least favorite people on the planet, pussy, can't drink. What, now we're not going to be friends anymore? I'm like, I never said any of that. Like, I never said I didn't want to be your friend. I said I have a problem and I need to fix myself, So it was it ran the gambit of responses of mostly outpouring of love. How can I help you? What can I do for you? Let me know what you need. And then the small percentage of people who, surprise, I don't talk to anymore, being like, oh, what, you're not going to drink or you're not going to do this? What, you can't just have one? What if we do, you know what I mean? What if you just cut out liquor? What if you just went to beer? And those are usually the people who have problems themselves. But
yeah.
My
I
first step was posting to social media.
no, I love that because I say that to people all the time is like one of the biggest things that helped me stay sober was that I outed myself on social media. It
Yes.
wasn't the first time I was a little bit farther along in my recovery, but I outed myself at work. I went into work after my last and I said like I have a problem. I'm gonna quit drinking. Like I'm sorry about what happened. I
What
said
was your job?
I was the controller. I was a CFO for a fruit packing warehouse.
Oh, okay.
Now I dance on tables.
That's okay. Go ahead. Do
Um,
you?
but I had drank at a work lunch. They knew I drank. I ended up leaving work. It was a big deal. I had just had the twins too. The twins were just a year old when this happened, and so that whole year was just a hot mess for me because I was constantly having issues with them, and I was up. I didn't sleep, anyways. But I used them as an excuse a lot. Like, oh, I'm just tired because of the twins. I was like, no, it's because I was drinking again.
Yeah.
But I then like at 60 days, I wrote a blog post and I was like, I've decided to take a break from alcohol. I don't like the way it makes me feel. So vanilla, not like I was in my garage contemplating suicide.
Yeah.
We didn't share all that stuff later, but once I said it, it was the same type thing. Like other people being like, "Hey, I quit drinking too," or I've taken like so many people that I'd already quit drinking that just didn't talk about it or shared like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing the same thing." So like outing myself was huge. So I always encourage people like out yourself somewhere because it gives you that like extra layer of accountability. Like, because yeah, once I say I don't drink alcohol, when I go down to the bar, people are like, I thought you like you're gonna have more whispers, you're gonna have
Yeah.
more people judging you for or you're gonna look crazier for going back and forth on it. It's like I put it out there that this was my decision, and then that was that was it. That was I just kept going with it.
Well, not even that, the layer of accountability to yourself, where you're like, I don't want to look like a liar. I don't want
Yeah,
to look like an asshole. Where I'm like, I make this big, giant, huge post on social media and then turn around 2 weeks later and I'm drinking again. Like, that's the last
exactly.
thing I want.
Yeah, like it was more of that like social accountability to myself, like not wanting to embarrass myself by saying something and that's why I didn't out myself before is because
Yeah.
I wasn't confident in my decision to actually stay sober because I had
No,
taken breaks before, but I was
we
like,
all
"Ooh, I
did.
don't want to tell anyone that because then they might hold me accountable or I might look crazy if I go back to drinking." But you do just hit this moment of like, I'm freaking done, uh, done playing this game. Like I want to be done. I want out, and I'm just gonna throw it out there that I'm done.
So here's the post I made.
Okay.
I posted it. It's a little, not like a meme, but it's just a little saying. And it says, you can't be healed in the same environment you got sick. So that's just that's the post. And then I wrote, I've typed this and deleted it 100 times over the course of the day. Too long, don't read. I have a drinking problem and needs to be addressed. As long as I've been drinking, I've been a blackout drunk, never stopping, never being able to stop once I start. I've eked my way out of so many horrible situations caused from drinking, and I know my luck is so close to running out. I'm tired of falling into the same horribly unhealthy habits, and I'm finally ready to make a change for good. I'm going to my first AA meeting tonight, and I'm taking my life back. I'm tired of hurting people who continuously support me. I'm tired of being a monster for a buzz. I'm tired of letting myself down. Why post it to social media? I need your support. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to admit, but I know I have good people in my corner and I need you guys right now. I need to be kept accountable, but more importantly, I need to know that I'm not alone. I love you all so much, and I promise to become this better version of myself for everyone's sake. Thanks for always having my back, and I promise I'll find a way to stay hilarious without ruining my life any further. Now I've just got to stop crying in this Panera bread. So that was like my out to the world, hey, please help me. Like, here's where I'm at post.
Oh, that like literally gives me chills because I like know that feeling. I know that moment of being there.
Because it does
Thank
get
you
to
for
a
sharing
certain
that.
point. It does get to a certain point where you're like, I cannot do this alone. I can't, dude. And you want to think that you can.
Mm-hmm.
You want to think I got this. And that's another reason why I think people don't share too, or don't say that they're stopping drinking, because it's like you said, if I fail, then no one knows. But it's also like, I want to know I can do it by myself. So I can announce it when I'm a year sober or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to quit drinking 4 times before I quit. Every year it was my New Year's resolution: 2016, 17, 18. And then in 2019 was the fourth time. So 3 years in a row was my New Year's resolution. And at 3 years in a row, I didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally get that.
I love that. And then so you chose AA as your community.
at first.
Okay.
I know I don't want to make anybody mad. I think it's a great tool. I think it
Okay.
is
Yeah.
absolutely there for people who need it. And I still go to meetings every now and then when I'm feeling really tough. Um, I had a lot of different issues with 12 step in general because I've been to AA meetings, I've been to GA meetings. It is nothing about the program, it is nothing about um, what they teach. It is nothing, I can't say enough good things about the program. If you need it and you feel like you have a problem and you don't know where to start, a meeting is a beautiful, wonderful, amazing place to start because you get to see people of all ages, all sizes, all shapes. Addiction does not care, dude. Addiction doesn't give a shit what you look like, how old you are, how much money you make. It does not care. And I think that's very, very important early in sobriety is learning we're all the same. Maybe our stories are a little bit different, but at the end of the day, we're all coping the same way and we're all trying to get rid of that coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So I started in meetings and then for personal reasons, I kind of stepped back from it and then found my own little support group and kind of cherry picked, which people don't like. I cherry picked. I took what I liked from
Yeah.
therapy and I took what I liked from meetings and I took what I liked from talking to other sober people and I kind of created my own thing. And there's some people in 12 step who will be like, nah, it's not okay. You have to commit fully to the every single, and it was a little too churchy for me. That's all. Is and not even the God thing. I still believe in God. It's not even that wasn't even
Yeah.
an issue. And they have atheist meetings if you don't believe in God. I have very deep unresolved religious trauma from being as a like in a childhood. So for me, meetings tended to trigger that. So it was not a great place for me to be emotionally.
Yeah.
So I do not want to say anything bad about meetings,
No,
just that it wasn't the right fit for me.
I respect that, and I have the same. Honestly, a lot of the ththings that you're saying are very parallel to mine, except for you have cats and I have kids. But I went to AA at the beginning, and I liked it, for that. Like, wow, there's a lot of people. Like the accountability. They kind of started to know me because I'd go on my lunch break. I went to the same meeting. I didn't want to let them down. It kind of started the process of building community, but I really built my community online. And then I started my own community for people in recovery where we focus on like how the three things that we talk about in this podcast, which is like the health, the habits, and the happiness. But I'm a firm believer that everybody kind of has their own path. And so I think that some people really need that rigidness of AA, and that works well for them. But I also think that some people need something a little bit different. And so you have to, I like the idea of cherry picking. Like, it's your life. Like, you
Yeah,
don't do it however the frick you want to do it. So
right.
if you're going to stay sober, AA is not a 100% guarantee that you'll stay sober. People are relapsing in AA all the time. People are relapsing on their own all the time. People are relapsing with therapy all the time. Like, it's whatever works for you so that you can stay healthy for yourself. And so
Right.
I love that viewpoint of AA is great. I started there. I know a lot of people that still go there. My fiance actually still goes to AA. He's big in that community, but a lot of our friends he met in AA and we hang out with outside of the meetings now. Like, we've kind of just created our own community, where at
Yeah.
the time I was so alone in my recovery. Like, I didn't know where to go. I didn't have friends that were sober.
Right.
So it was a way for me to connect to people in sobriety.
Well, and that's why I think it is so important at the beginning because depending on where you're at, there is going to be a meeting. I can promise you that. I don't care if you're in a podunk, hell nowhere, middle of Nebraska. There's a meeting. I promise.
Mhm.
And I was a bartender. I was a stand-up comic. I didn't have friends who were sober. Are you kidding me? Everyone I knew, everyone I knew was using something. So to go there, and even if it is a 50-year-old lady who you think you can't relate to at all, wait till you hear her share because you are going to be amazed at the people you can relate to. I'm not saying those people have to be your best friends, but if you are early in sobriety, I absolutely think a meeting is a wonderful place to start. And there's a lot of places too that have like young people meetings, or they go based on age groups, or they everywhere has only women or only men
Mhm.
or whatever. But yeah, I ended up being a cherry picker myself. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's just fine. Yeah, I think whatever keeps you sober.
Yeah,
Okay, so what has changed in your life since you got sober? So how has things improved? Or not
everything.
improved, I guess. Maybe
Everything.
what are well, you said the biggest thing was dealing with your feelings. So I know you kind of shared a little bit earlier about how like you kind of switched addictions and kind of like chose not as bad of one and then not as bad of one. So like
Yeah.
what are you doing now to try and work on the feelings and being able to process your feelings?
So for me, just to answer the first part of the question, what's gotten better? Literally everything. I mean, I can't, I had a breakdown. Where was I? I was in St. Louis and I was doing shows, which is the other cool thing is that I travel for work. So if I do feel like I need a meeting, they're all over the country. So I went to a meeting with another sober comic in St. Louis and we were sitting there and I was having this really just like overwhelming feeling of gratitude that day where I was like, I just need to be around some sober people for a little while. And it's funny because I think about my life 5 years ago and I think about the day that I had the moment of clarity and I was looking around and my life was destroyed and it was a mess. And then I think about what I have now. I have an incredible partner who's also sober. He has an 8-year-old daughter that I get to be involved in her life in a parental capacity, that I love. That's such a cool, different part of life that I never wanted kids. So this was not a part of my plan, but I fell in love with a man who had one and it's enriched my life in ways I couldn't even imagine were for me.
Mhm.
Um, had I met them when I was drinking, oh, it would have never, it would have been horrible. It would have been
Mhm.
absolutely terrible. So I love that they're a part of my life now, sober. And then I also look at what we have. We have a cute little house in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and we have ferns and mums in the fall, and we decorate for Christmas, and we have all these like small, what other people would probably take for granted things. But
Mhm.
I look at our 4-bedroom house that's all decorated for Christmas. And I was like at that meeting in St. Louis and I was just crying because I was like, if I would have told myself on that day that I had the moment of clarity where I felt like I was living in my own filth, that, hey, in 4 years, this was last year, in 4 years, you're going to have everything you ever wanted. I wouldn't have believed it, you know?
Mhm.
So that's just personal life. And then my career, not being hammered and messing up opportunities and being in a better state of mind with my free time, being able to write and think and just never having to clock out, I guess,
Mhm.
with emotions. I'm sharper, I'm funnier, I'm able to remember my interactions with fans and producers and bookers and all that. So my career's better, my life is better. Like, yes, I do still have other areas to work on, like with the gambling is probably the one that's the hardest for me because I want to believe that one day I can do it normal, even though I know that that's not what it is. Um, but I do that through therapy, and I have a friend who's recovered 8 years from gambling addiction, so he's someone I reach out to. So kind of just like therapy, building a community, being open, being honest, both with others and with myself, and that's kind of what keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Mhm. I love that. And the aspect of having the simple things that we took for granted, or that other people take for granted. Like I had a moment like that with my kids where my son got hurt and it was nighttime, like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And it was like trying to decide if I needed to take him to the hospital or not. Like, okay, is this going to need stitches? Is this not? And I never had to think about if I was going to be able to drive him to the hospital.
Yeah,
Like 6 years ago, it was like, oh my God, he's hurt. And if we had to go to the hospital, it was like, am I risking a DUI or am I going to have to like put like what's the hurt my ego and pride or whatever and call my mom to take him and have to admit that I'm drunk and can't drive him. Like
yeah,
it was this whole spiral of things that most people that aren't alcoholics or aren't drunk every night. So it's like these little things that we get to be grateful for because we know that there was a time in our life that we didn't have them. So many people don't understand, like the garden and the house and being able to decorate and being present while you're decorating versus like
yeah,
drinking a glass of wine as I put up the tree and being blacked out and passed out by the end of the night because
yeah,
yeah, like it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I feel like that's one of the beauties of addiction is that we forever get this extra layer of gratitude for the simple things. I don't know if you feel like that's maybe
Definitely. I agree 100%. I wish I could feel it without having to go through everything I went through. You know what I mean?
yeah, like how do I bottle this up and give to people to like that
yeah.
don't have like don't kids my like to my own kids like you don't have to go through all of this pain and chaos and destructive behavior to realize how beautiful life can be. Like how do I teach them that?
I think through exactly what you're doing, through your actions and showing by being a model of it, where you point out small things that you appreciate and you say, oh, isn't this beautiful? Or look at this wonderful moment. And you don't have to be weird about it. You don't have to cry every time something cool is happening, you know? But by showing them that you can be in the moment and appreciate those things, they're gonna like that and they're gonna see that and they're gonna mimic that themselves, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Do you have people come up to you after shows and say like, "Hey, I'm struggling with alcohol"? Like, have you had those kinds of
All the
situations?
time. Yeah, people do that all the time. Where I mean, I haven't been doing as much sober material lately. But when I was working it out, it's on my last album. Most of it, it's called Nothing Matters. You can find it on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you get anything. I had a good chunk. So in the time I was working out that material about being sober, there was always people coming up to me and being like, "Oh, I'm sober too," or I related to this part of it," or, "I'm thinking about getting sober. How do you deal with being in nightclubs, or how do you deal with traveling, or how do you deal with that?" Um, when you talk about it, people relate and they will come up and they will inquire. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
if they are truly like wanting to make a change or at least curious, people ask
Yeah.
a lot of questions. So being open about it only helps.
I think that that's a powerful thing is like, yeah, when we talk about it, it actually does open up the door for other people to talk about it.
It just normalizes it.
Hmm.
Stand-up comedy is seen as a very cool thing, regardless of if you think it's cool or not, or if I think I'm cool or not. It's seen as a cool thing. So when I'm up there and I'm talking about not drinking, people are sometimes like, "Oh, you can have a cool job and not drink, or you can," you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Or you
you
could
can
still
do
be
it.
funny.
Yeah.
You could still be funny. You could still be the center of attention. You could still
Yeah.
like,
I'm
yeah.
enjoying this person and she's not drunk. That's crazy.
Hmm.
What if I was like that? Would people still enjoy me if I was not drunk?
Hmm.
So it is pretty cool.
Do you feel like were you afraid to get sober because like you would lose your funny? Like do you feel like alcohol because those were so connected that you wouldn't be as creative or wouldn't be as funny if you didn't have alcohol?
Definitely. I mean, I felt like, and like I said, I was using it hand in hand early on, where I was like, "Oh, I'm so hilarious," or it just loosened me up to be a little bit more silly or a little bit more myself or whatever it might be. And I was always worried about that it was like, well, how could I perform sober? But for me, it was more about like the networking or the being in the club afterward or like talking to people or making fans. And it was like, oh, you were getting blacked out with people. So, and it's so funny because I used to like to sit at home and have like 2 glasses a bottle of wine and write. And it was like, well, I always feel my most creative when I'm drinking, like as far as like sitting down to physically write.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, I would go back and read it and I'd be like, this is horrible. Like, this is not funny at all. Unless everyone in the room is drunk on 3 glasses of wine and lives exactly your life, no one is going to know that this is funny.
Mhm.
So I think all of that came kind of in hindsight, that I wasn't really scared or nervous, but it was like, this is the only way I've ever done it. So I
Mhm.
don't really know how it's going to go without it.
Mhm.
But it's much better now. I can promise you that. It's much better now.
Yeah, like I mean you're hilarious and obviously your career has grown since getting sober, so it sounds like sobriety definitely helped with that.
Well, and I also think about living in New York City. I've been here about a year now, and I'm like, I could have never been here drunk. Never. I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have made it home. I mean, it's the accessibility, the fact that you are walking and it is bar, 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 like depending on the neighborhood that you're in, it's everywhere.
Mhm.
And if you know the right places to go, it's cheap. In a lot of places where you perform for comedy, you're getting drink tickets or a tab or whatever. Um, I would have ruined so many relationships. Like there's just no way. And I that's another thing I'm grateful for all the time, is that I'm grateful to be doing these things and living this life sober, because there's no way I would have been able to do it drunk. The things
Mhm.
that I'm doing now, or
Mhm.
like after my dad passed away, there's no way I would have been able to grieve him still drinking.
Mhm.
I would still now, almost 4 years after his passing, be just as much of a mess and just as much of a train wreck as I was the day that he died, because I wouldn't have been dealing with those feelings. I would have
Yeah,
been
like
pushing them down and masking them.
you just pause them. It's just like this huge pause. Like I know for the first year I was just like crying randomly all the time, but it was just like all of that that I never let myself actually feel just started like flowing out of me.
Yeah. It comes out all the time.
Yeah, it still does. I mean, it's still something that I'm like, I feel like I'm definitely more emotional. I'm getting better. I mean, I'm 6 years in, but I think that something that has been really cool to like finally learn is like, this is just kind of who I am. This isn't like this is just a journey. Like it's just going to be on this journey with me forever. I
Hmm.
think it was like at first, at first, even in sobriety, I kind of like masked a lot of things like, oh no, look, I'm doing great. Everything's happening. It's all fine. But then like once that pink cloud kind of wears off and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to go through this emotional state for a little bit and I'll be better. And I'm like, no, I'm constantly going to have to be working on how I can like pivot to be a little bit better at things. Like it's never going to be perfect.
No, it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect is the enemy of good. You know, if you're always trying to be perfect, you're never going to enjoy the crap that's good. You're never going to be in the moment for the cool stuff, you know? And that's in anything. That's in work, that's in life, that's in emotions, that's in all of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's next for you? Because you quit and then got fired.
Oh my God. Radio
Not to bring
gig.
it up.
I put in my notice because I was like, I've worked on radio show in Cleveland. It's called the Alan Cox Show. I was on it for 6 years. And I moved to New York to do stand up. So I told them, hey, I'm going to finish out the rest of this year. And then next year, I want to focus fully on stand up. I feel like I'm half assing both. I've got one foot out the door in each of these, and I can't do that, you know? So I told them back in September, I'm going to finish out this year and then that'll be it. And then 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call and they're like, hey, you don't work here anymore. And I was like, what? And they were like, it came down from corporate that they're like restructuring. So it wasn't like it had nothing to do with me putting in my notice. It had nothing to do with anything. It was just like that iHeartMedia corporate was cutting a bunch of people and a bunch of money. And there was like hundreds of layoffs that same day. But yes, I did get fired from a job that I quit. So that's a sentence I never knew that I could say. So
Where could people find you if they wanted to come to one of your shows?
So I'm going to be probably in New York pretty heavy next year, just because I want to be here. I live here now. I'm still in a long distance relationship with my boyfriend and his daughter in Ohio. Like I don't want to have moved for nothing or to be, I want to be present in New York City. So I have marysantora.com is where all of my upcoming tour dates are, or you can follow me on social media. It's just at Mary Santora Comedy on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. And I'm always posting on there. But as far as like what's to come, I just really want to focus on getting as good as I can get and putting out the best material that I can put out in the next year. And just being like super, I've never only had comedy. So being super focused on stand up is what I want for the next year. I don't know what's going to come of it. I don't know. I mean, people, Netflix goal, this, that. I don't know. I just want to do my best.
Do your best.
I just want to do my best. That's all I can do, you know?
I love it. I love it. I feel like I talk to my kids and my clients about that all the time. Like, I'm not asking you to be 100%. I'm not asking you to hit your goals. I'm saying do your best. Set something, have a vision, and then do your best to work towards it. So that's perfect.
Absolutely.
All right. Any final words for people that are new to sobriety or trying to get sober that you'd want to encourage them?
I mean, it's so cliche, but one day at a time, man.
Mm-hmm.
One day at a time. Don't focus on a wedding next week or where you're going to be at in a month. It's today. What can I do today? You know, I had a crazy couple weeks just with everything the last few weeks, and I was having a really, really bad day. And so some days you can't take it one day at a time. Sometimes you got to take it 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. And I was having a 1 hour at a time day. So like I woke up and I said, what can I do first? So, all right, well, let's make breakfast. And so I made breakfast. I said, what can I do next? Because I wanted to drink, but more than that, I wanted to go to the casino. And so I was like, what can I do to fill my time so I'm not using or gambling or whatever? So I like woke up, I made breakfast, I cleaned my apartment, I went for like a 2 hour walk, I read a book, I went to lunch with a friend, I came home, I showered, I napped, I went to a meeting. Like I did everything I could do in that day, but I took it one step at a time where it's like, okay, I got done eating breakfast. Now what? Now let's clean up. Okay, we're done cleaning up. Now what? Now let's make the bed. Now let's do this. And it seems insane and it seems like a lot, but there have been so many days where that's all that's gotten me through. Was like, okay, I made it until 1:30 p.m. Now it's 1:30. How can I make it until 2:30 p.m.? And that's all you focus on is this next hour. Don't worry about the end of the day. Don't worry about anything else. Just focus on the very moment and how you can get through that moment sober.
I love that. I love it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
And make sure you guys go and follow her on everything. I'll have it all linked below. I'll have it linked wherever you hear this or listen to this or watch this, it will be linked. So make sure you follow her, support her if you're in New York. And thanks for joining us again for another episode of Addicted to Quitting podcast, where we are focusing on quitting things that no longer serve us, sometimes jobs, even if they're going to fire us for them later, alcohol, emotional instability, gambling, all the things. So continue to quit things that don't serve you so you can level up in your life. Bye.
Bye.